presented our case for the most plausible route, and then we read through Exodus and picked up some amazing points, and then where elsewhere, like in Galatians 4:25, and we corroborated totally the direction Succoth, eastward, not south, not north, eastward, out of Egypt, not through Egypt, and then make a southerly route down across the right hand or eastern side or branch of the Red Sea and over into Arabia, which is where Paul says in Galatians 4:25 the location of Mt Sinai is. So the Israelites journeyed over the caravan route, trade route, across mountainous land, which followed the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and the trade route turned northward toward the land of the Philistines. The children of Israel continued to go eastward, not northward, on the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and camped in the desert of Etham, an expansive desert area which began at Etham and continued eastward, extending through mountainous terrain, and then southward all around the north end of the western branch of the Red Sea, today called the Gulf of Aqaba. Okay. And we have passages in Exodus, Numbers, and 1 Kings to verify that. There in the wilderness of Etham they set up camp, evidently having crossed by the path that would lead them to the Red Sea in order to find adequate camping space, intending to double back to get to the Red Sea. That's why that little squiggle line goes a little bit upwards north and then straight back down where they came from and went south to that location at Nuweiba Beach. So the next day at their encampment in the wilderness of Etham, they turned back westward, retracing their steps, and went southeast through the steep mountain gorge that led to Pi-hahiroth on the western coast of the Gulf of Aqaba, the ancient Red Sea that borders Arabia. And they arrived at the Nuweiba Peninsula to camp there near Migdol on a beach approximately 4.25 miles long by 2 miles wide. This would easily have accommodated the millions of Israelites and their flocks and herds. Take a look at this. Israelites crossed over the Red Sea at the Gulf of Aqaba. And we reviewed this before. The proper name Red Sea, Yamsup, means sea, and sup is a noun which is generally a term for marine plants. And so we have a number of places that can be, but we have to all get all the details together, and so far we've got it all together. So in the context of the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt, and in these passages which we looked at here, the Hebrew name Yamsup is always translated Red Sea, which was the name given to it by the Greeks in the Septuagint. The origin of this Red Sea, the name Red Sea, is uncertain. It may be derived from red color of the mountains, western shore, or otherwise from the red coral found in the sea, or the red appearance sometimes given to the water by certain zoophytes floating in it. In any case, we're corroborating fully where we are now, which is evidently where they crossed the Red Sea to arrive on the eastern shore of the town of Baal-Zephon in Arabia. Note, and these are right out of Scripture. Note that the children of Israel could have traveled 50 miles north through the wilderness of Etham or Shur and circled around the northern end of the Red Sea on dry land into Arabia and then turned southward towards Mt Sinai, as some contend. However, the Lord had a plan to entrap Pharaoh and his armies. Why didn't they go that way? Well, it's not reported that why they didn't. It says what they did do. So let's not try to editorialize this. So the Lord had planned, as we see the outcome, to entrap Pharaoh and his armies and corroborate his promise to see to it that his children of Israel would make it safely to the end of their journey. Because the Pharaoh's armies could easily have gone and followed that other northerly route and surrounded the Israelites and destroyed them, but instead puts them at the edge of the Red Sea, and as the Israelites crossed ahead of the Egyptian army, just behind it, they got safely over, dry shod, over to Arabia. And then when the Pharaoh and his armies came over They crossed over the Red Sea that was dry shot. All of a sudden, the water was whipped up by the wind, and they were all drowned. So since Baal-Zephon, literally the Lord of the North, refers to a northwest Semitic sea or storm god, the title of the supreme god of the Canaanites, this corroborates the location. It is unlikely that this town would be inland in Egypt, or somewhere in the Nile Delta, or in the Sinai wilderness, or off the Straits of Tiran, as some contend. They were just, very few actually followed the scriptures and point for point corroborate, as we have done here. But east in Arabia, nearer to Canaan. From there they journeyed along their route toward Mt Sinai, which according to the Apostle Paul was in Arabia. Look at Exodus 13, 1-22. 21. And the Lord before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Okay, so we finished Exodus 13 and how they were led. There wasn't a map for them to follow. The Lord led them personally. And then now we jump to Exodus 14. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they turn and camp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal-Zephon. You shall camp before it by the sea. Is that any more particular? We're triangulating the precise position. Pi-hahiroth is a proper noun beginning with the word transliterated pi, which means mouth or opening. On the beaches, all the way to the other directions that people contend, there's no such opening. It's a flat beach. In the context of Israel's Exodus, Pi-hahiroth refers to a mouth or opening to an insurmountable geographical barrier adjacent to the Red Sea. This is the only place you're going to find it. At Arabia, a geographical entity all around them which blocked their escape of the children of Israel from the pursuing Egyptians behind them. They had to put their complete trust in Lord, He's leading them and following them, and by day and by night. So the Egyptians behind them, and the Red Sea in front of them, a fitting description for the Nuweiba Peninsula, since it lies along steep mountains, which have been between them and a wide gorge that opens up into the Nuweiba Peninsula beach in front of the Red Sea, Gulf of Aqaba, 4¼ miles, 2 miles deep. This is the only location on the shore of the Red Sea, the only location, which lies along mountainous terrain, which has a gorge, which opens up into a substantial peninsula beach before that sea, which could accommodate several million people, their flocks and their herds, one which best fits the scriptural account. All right. The helicopters are after me. Migdol was once a 3-story Egyptian fortress. Note that the wall on the right here, see this wall on the right, being restored, it blocked the northern escape route along Nuweiba Beach. You can see the previous image here. There's Nuweiba Beach. Okay. And the fortress is located about here. You get to blow a picture of it and go back to where we were. By the way, there's a column on both sides of that crossing mounted by Solomon, with the writing commemorating the crossing at that specific point. On the other side, it's also a column, but the writing was destroyed, but the column lays flat. But we still see some Hebrew words commemorating the crossing. I guess the Arabic people didn't want to commemorate such a crossing in their territory. So, Exodus 14:3, For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land, the wilderness has closed them in. And that was the case. Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart, God says, so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. Now it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? So he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. There's the army, the chariot army, in pursuit. Also we took 600 choice chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, with captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh once more, king of Egypt. Then he pursued the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with boldness. So the Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them camping by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth before Baal-Zephon. There it is. Here's the map. Baal-Zephon, Pi-hahiroth, Nuweiba Beach, Migdol, the Egyptian fortress, all along this line. There's the Wadi Watir, the Gulf of Aqaba. Notice that the beach, Nuweiba Beach, is located near the Egyptian military fortress at Migdol and Pi-hahiroth, across the sea from Baal-Zephon in Saudi Arabia. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we were told in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. So given the close proximity of the Nile's eastern delta, it is unlikely that the children of Israel traveled in such a short time northwestward to cross a marshland or a lake in that region, as many Bible maps and many people contend. I laugh at this because if the chariot army comes up to the edge where the Israelites supposedly crossed into a marshland and over, the captains of the chariot army say, well, we're not going through there. We're going on the other side and catch them there and just wait for them. Furthermore, there was not enough water in the marshland to drown the Egyptian armies anyway, nor would a lake such as El Baha Lake, Bala Lake, or the Bitter Lakes, or the Lake Timsah suffice, for there was nothing in the surrounding terrain, such as mountains, which would have blocked the Israelites' retreat. Why would the Israelites go into a marshland when they can go around it themselves? That doesn't make any sense. Furthermore, the Egyptians could have pursued the Israelites on land by going around the lake, like I just said, and to the other side and catch up with the Israelites without suffering a drowning in the water. And since these proposed routes are all such a short distance from Succoth, far less than 25 days, they're not far enough away to justify the Israelites' bitter complaints about being in the wilderness. And they are too close to suit the biblical account of about a month's travel time. Furthermore, Scripture declares that the children of Israel would be out of the land of Egypt. Now, when you go into the Sinai wilderness, that was still not proper Egypt, although Egypt had mines there, turquoise and other, and then a fortress to protect their mining operations and so on. But that wasn't proper Egypt. That was just a territory that Egypt occupied. So they would be out of the land of Egypt, and they were on the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and on their first day of travel, and not in the Nile's eastern delta to the north, a few miles from Succoth. Exodus 12:17 corroborates this. So you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this same day I will have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Not 25 days. One day they're out of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as an everlasting ordinance. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and were very quickly out of Egypt on that same day, and the children of Israel, went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. Finally, in any of these scenarios, the location of Mount Sinai would not have been in Arabia, where Mount Sinai is located, according to the Apostle Paul. It's not a beachfront property, Mount Sinai, If the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea was the flat, sandy terrain along which is now called the Gulf of Suez, which many Bible maps and many people contend, leading to the Straits of Tiran to the Red Sea, they would have traveled much faster, obviously, and much further than needed to get to the proposed destination through this winding around and around caravan route through mountainous territory. And there would be nothing at the end of their journey to block their retreat, but more flat beach terrain northward around the eastern sea side of the Sinai Peninsula along the Gulf of Aqaba. But Scripture indicates that the children of Israel took about a month to travel through the mountainous terrain of the wilderness to the Red Sea, not flat beach terrain. This kind of terrain slowed them down in a manner consistent with the account in Scripture, and at the end of the journey to the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, the Israelites would be in a gorge between the steep mountains with the pursuing Egyptians blocking their retreat. The name Pi-hahiroth in the Exodus 14:2 and 9 is a